everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Positive Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Parmis, and I'm so glad that you're here. If you want to listen to more episodes like this one on self-improvement, mindset, and wellness, go ahead and hit that follow button to join the family. Before I get into today's episode, I just want to ask you guys for a quick and kind favor, and that is if you haven't yet left a review, I would absolutely appreciate if you could do so. It helps so much to build this podcast and help it grow so that we can increase the positive impact we make and just overall make it a bigger community. Also, if you're looking for daily motivation, follow me on Instagram at Positive Proof Podcast, where I post behind the scenes content and daily quotes that serve as sweet daily reminders. And if anyone is wondering how to leave episode requests, you can actually send me your thoughts via the DM me your thoughts link in the description or just via Instagram DM as well. And if you're listening on Spotify, scroll down and let me know in the poll below which of the people-pleasing habits you catch yourself doing the most. I'm really curious to see if we're all struggling with the same ones or different ones. Now let's get into today's episode. If you've ever found yourself saying yes when you meant no, or smiling when you felt unseen, or explaining yourself over and over just to avoid disappointing someone, then this episode is for you. Because today we're going to be unpacking the quiet, the exhausting habit of people-pleasing, not from a place of shame, but with clarity, compassion, and honesty. We're going to be talking about where it comes from, what it costs us, and what it actually feels like to break free from it without turning into someone you're not. Because this isn't about becoming cold or distant, it's about finally becoming real. And this is all coming from someone who is an extreme people pleaser, or at least was, and is still working on it. So let's get into it. Now, people think people pleasing is just being nice, but that's really not it. There is a massive difference between being kind and being afraid to disappoint someone. And people pleasing isn't generosity. It's self-betrayal dressed up as politeness. Sometimes it looks like saying yes to plans you don't want to go to, or laughing at jokes that actually make you uncomfortable, or writing long texts to justify a simple no, letting someone else make the decision because you just don't mind, or silently seething because you didn't speak up. Again. So you're not doing it because you're weak, you're doing it because somewhere along the way you learned that being agreeable made things easier. Made it safer or more predictable. You became the smooth surface in everyone else's chaos. But here's the thing, people-pleasing is subtle. It sneaks up in moments that seem harmless. Maybe it's when your boss adds another task to your already full plate, and instead of saying, I'm at capacity, you smile and say, sure, I'll get on that. Or when a friend crosses a boundary and instead of calling it out, you let it slide because you don't want to cause drama. And sometimes the hardest part is realizing that even the praise we get for being so reliable or so sweet or so chill, that's just reinforcement for behavior that's slowly burning us out. I used to think I was just being accommodating, that I was easygoing or low maintenance, until I really realized I didn't actually know what I wanted anymore because I was too busy shape-shifting to match what everyone else wanted from me. People-pleasing often shows up in your tone. It's in the way you cushion your sentences, like, I'm so sorry, I just want to ask if it's okay if, or another example is, it's totally fine if not, but I was wondering. And another example, no worries at all, I totally understand if you're busy. See, you turn a simple question into a TED Talk because you were afraid of being seen as too much, too needy, or too assertive. And let's not even get into dating. People-pleasing there is a whole other beast. It's, playing the cool girl who doesn't care. It's not texting first, even though you want to, because you don't want to look desperate. It's pretending to be okay with something just to seem low drama. But the truth is, it's not low drama, it's low self-honesty. And what's tricky is that people-pleasing gets rewarded. You get liked, you get praised, you're seen as dependable, agreeable, nice, and depending on your upbringing, you might have been taught that those are the things that make you worthy. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Being liked and being respected aren't always the same thing. People might like your smile or your helpfulness, your whatever works for you energy, but do they respect your boundaries or your time? Or your voice? And if the answer is no, it might be because you haven't let them see those parts of you. And maybe you haven't even let yourself see them. People pleasing isn't just about other people, it's about how disconnected you've become from your own truth. Because every single time you swallow your no, you are also swallowing your yes. You are silencing your instincts. You are basically saying that other people's comfort is more important than your clarity. And maybe you're thinking, okay, but isn't it good to care about others? Of course it is. Caring is beautiful, but caring at the expense of yourself is called slow erosion, and it's unsustainable. You can only deny your needs for so long before they start to leak out in burnout, in resentment, and feeling chronically misunderstood. So if any of this hit, if you're nodding along right now, I want you to ask yourself something. When was the last time that you said yes out of fear instead of desire? That is the moment to look at, not with shame or with judgment, just with curiosity. Because awareness is where this all starts. And I promise, once you start noticing how often you shrink, explain, adjust, or accommodate, it becomes impossible to ignore. And listen, that's a good thing, because if you've mastered the art of people pleasing, then you can also master the art of truth telling too. You already have the emotional intelligence. Now it's just about redirecting it, not toward avoiding discomfort, but toward honoring yourself. And you don't just wake up one day and decide to be a people pleaser. It's not a conscious choice. It's actually something you learn, and people don't often know this. It's something that your nervous system picks up on and stores as a survival strategy. The first time that you ever said no and got punished for it, even if it was subtle, even if it was just a cold look or a shift in someone's mood, your body took notes. The first time you were praised for being so easy or so mature, you internalized that as a gold star, a roadmap, a formula for safety. Because that's what this really comes down to, safety. Most people pleasers weren't raised in environments where emotional honesty felt safe. And that doesn't mean you had a bad childhood or that your parents didn't love you. It just means that somewhere along the way, your brain made a connection between being liked and being protected. I had an amazing childhood, but for me, my tendency to be a people pleaser formed in my group of friends in elementary school and in high school. Maybe you were celebrated when you performed and when you were polite and when you put others first, but when you had needs, or when you had anger or boundaries or anything messy, suddenly the energy shifted. So what do? You clean it up. You shrink it down. You become agreeable. You learn to preempt conflict before it even happens. You read the room obsessively. You notice micro expressions, changes in tone, emotional shifts, all the things a child shouldn't be worried about, but many are. And by the time you're an adult, people don't see it as hypervigilance. They just think they're being thoughtful, empathetic, like a good listener. But internally, you're constantly scanning for approval or bracing for rejection and bending yourself to stay in someone's good graces. And this is especially true if you identify as a woman. Let me explain. Most girls are socialized from a young age to be likable, to be polite, and to be accommodating, to be emotionally available to everyone but themselves. And we're praised for being low maintenance, but we're punished, sometimes socially and sometimes subtly, for being assertive. It is baked into how we are taught to communicate. For example, a boy sets a boundary and he's confident, but a girl does it and she's bossy or cold. So we learn to soften our edges. We make everything sound like a suggestion, not a decision. We decorate our truth with exclamation points and emojis so no one misreads it as too blunt. And if we experienced any kind of trauma, whether it's big T drama or the chronic invisible kind, people-pleasing can show up as a fawn response.
Let's take a quick break.
Welcome to the Living a Life in Balance podcast, where we sit down with leading minds in mental, physical, and emotional health. I'm your host, Abdullah Boulad, founder and CEO of the Balance Rehab Clinic. For the past 7 years, my team and I have supported high performers from around the world to find their way back to balance. With this podcast, we are opening the doors to the world-class health information, so whether you are navigating trauma, burnout, or simply seeking more clarity and purpose, tune into conversations that will inspire you to find your own balance.
We all know fight, flight, freeze, but fawn is the lesser known trauma response. It's when your body responds to perceived danger by appeasing, by trying to neutralize the threat through charm, helpfulness, and compliance. And it works, but for a while. Over time, though, that strategy creates a huge disconnect. You are constantly reading them, but you stop reading you. What do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? The answers get murky when you've spent years outsourcing your sense of self to, other people's moods, preferences, and opinions. And here's where it gets even trickier. People-pleasing can masquerade as emotional intelligence. You are attuned. You are aware. You know what makes people feel seen, and that's a beautiful gift. But when you're using that gift to avoid discomfort rather than create connection, it becomes a mask. A performance. You can be emotionally intelligent and boundaryless. You can be deeply caring and still betray yourself daily. Both can be true and often are. That's why I always say people-pleasing isn't about being too nice. It's about being too afraid to take up space, too afraid to be misunderstood, too afraid to disappoint someone, even if it means disappointing yourself. And let's be real, this pattern, it doesn't go away overnight because it's not just behavioral, it's nervous system deep. Your body's been wired to associate safety with compliance. So when you try to set a boundary or speak more directly, your body literally might panic. It might tell you that you're being mean or selfish or just too much. But that is just the old programming speaking. The child in you who learned that truth equals danger. Now, the good news is you can rewire all of that slowly, gently, and with practice. You're going to start by noticing your yes moments, the ones that don't really feel clean. And you're going to ask yourself, did I say yes to avoid guilt? Or did I say yes because I truly, truly wanted to? Or just because I was afraid of what they think if I didn't? And more importantly, what would I have said if I weren't afraid? That is where the healing begins. Not with perfection, but with noticing, with naming, with curiosity. Because once you start questioning the roots of people-pleasing, you are already on your way to reclaiming your voice. Now, we tend to think of people-pleasing as being harmless. Like, yeah, okay, maybe I say yes too often. Maybe I over-apologize. Not ideal, but at least I'm not hurting anyone, right? But what if I told you that people-pleasing does hurt someone? You. It hurts you. It's one of those behaviors that seems minor on the surface, like it's just part of your personality, but over time, it leaves a trail. And if you follow that trail long enough, you'll start to see the cost. Because the price of constantly putting others first isn't just time or energy, it's literally your identity. So let's start with one of the most common consequences, resentment. The irony is that people pleasers are often the most resentful people in the room. Not because they're bad people, but because they're constantly betraying themselves and no one else seems to notice. For example, you might bend over backwards for someone and they don't even acknowledge it, and suddenly you feel bitter. But can you really blame them if you've never told them that it was a stretch for you? When you constantly say yes, people assume you're fine. They assume you're available, willing, and comfortable. And slowly it becomes your reputation. She's chill, she never minds, she's always down, until one day you do mind. But now voicing that feels like a betrayal, not just to them, but to the identity you spent years crafting. Another quiet consequence is emotional exhaustion. People-pleasing is a full-time job with no benefits and no time off. You are always performing. You are always adjusting your words, anticipating reactions, cushioning every statement, absorbing everyone else's needs, and that mental load is so heavy. And yet it rarely gets acknowledged because you make it look so seamless. You might not even realize how drained you are until you're alone. And even then, you feel guilty for needing rest, for doing nothing. Because rest, to a people pleaser, can feel selfish. And if you're not producing or helping or showing up, then who are you? Which brings me to another consequence, losing touch with your own desires. This one is insidious. When you spend your life tuning into everyone else's preferences, you start to forget your own. You get so good at reading the room that you stop reading yourself. Like, how do you want to spend your weekend? What kind of relationship do you actually want? Do you even like that job, or do you just like being praised for being good at it? If those questions feel fuzzy or overwhelming, that's not a you problem. That's what happens when you've been living your life in response to other people instead of in alignment with yourself. And then there's the way it impacts your relationships, the part no one talks enough about. People pleasing attracts the kind of relationships where your needs aren't prioritized. Not because you don't deserve to be prioritized, but because you have literally trained people to not expect you to have needs. Whether it's romantic, platonic, or professional, when you operate from a place of quote unquote, I'll just go with whatever works for you, you often attract people who are happy to make it all about them. They're not necessarily manipulative, some might even be oblivious, but the dynamic still becomes unbalanced. You are giving 80% and they're giving 20%, and you're both pretending that feels normal. And over time, this creates a deep feeling of being misunderstood. You show up for everyone, but no one really sees you. You're always available, but no one's ever asking you how you're doing. And when they do, you're so used to downplaying it that it becomes a cycle. You feel unseen, you minimize yourself more, and then you feel even more unseen. Eventually, you really start to question your worth. Not outwardly, you might still look confident and still function, still keep the smile on, but deep down, there's this question that floats in the background. Would they still love me if I stop performing? And that's the core fear people-pleasing builds around. If I stop showing up in the way they expect me to, and if I say no, or if I disappoint someone, will I still be loved? And here's what's wild. Most people who love you, the real ones, they want your truth. They want your honesty, your boundaries, your clarity. The only people who are uncomfortable with your no are the ones benefiting from your inability to say it. I'm going to say that again. The only people who are uncomfortable with your no's are the ones benefiting from your inability to say it. So if you're starting to feel the weight of people-pleasing, the exhaustion, the quiet resentment, the fuzzy sense of self, that is not a flaw. That is your body and mind asking for alignment. Because the truth is, being liked by everyone means nothing if you don't like the version of yourself they like. You don't owe anyone a watered-down version of you just to make them feel comfortable. And if someone's connection to you is conditional on you shrinking, softening, or staying silent, that's not connection. That's control with better branding. And let's be honest here, most advice around people-pleasing sounds good in theory, like set boundaries, say no, protect your peace. But in practice, it is emotionally way more complicated. The moment you try to show up differently, your body floods with guilt, with anxiety, or with self-doubt. Even if your brain understands that you're allowed to speak up, some part of you still feels like you've done something wrong. And that's the thing that no one tells you. Unlearning people-pleasing isn't about becoming bolder overnight. It's not about swinging to the other extreme and suddenly becoming unbothered and assertive. It's about learning to sit with the internal chaos that arises the moment you stop over-functioning for everyone else. It's slow. It's awkward, it's messy, and often very quiet. And in the beginning, it doesn't even feel empowering. It probably feels like a loss, kind of like a loss of identity or loss of approval, loss of control over how people see you. You might send a short, clear message and then spiral for hours afterward. You'll replay it, overanalyze the tone, wonder if you should have added more warmth, more explanation, more emojis, anything to make it easier to digest. You'll probably worry that being honest has changed the way someone sees you, but that is not weakness. That is the nervous system going through withdrawal from its oldest drug called external validation. And that's where the work actually begins. Not in the moment you say no, but in the uncomfortable silence afterwards, when no one rushes in to reassure you, when you're left to self-soothe, when you have to hold your own emotional hand. And one of the hardest shifts is learning to disappoint someone and still feel like a good person. Because for people pleasers, the two have always been mutually exclusive. Disappointment used to signal failure, but now you're learning that it might just signal honesty. And again, that doesn't happen overnight. It starts in tiny, seemingly insignificant moments. Moments that don't look brave from the outside, but feel massive internally. Like resisting the urge to soften a sentence when you know it's already kind. Like hitting send on the text without padding it in apologies. Like walking away from a conversation knowing you told the truth, even if the other person didn't receive it well. You might find yourself grieving the version of you that was always agreeable, the one that was loved and praised and she was everyone's favorite, but that person also carried a quiet sadness. She lived on edge. She didn't trust that her no could coexist with love. She didn't believe she could be chosen if she stopped performing. And how sad is that? And so there is grief in letting her go, not because she was fake, but because she was loyal, even to her own pain. And that grief is valid, okay? I'm here with you. I hear you. I see you. But it's also a portal because on the other side of it is someone much more grounded, someone whose worth doesn't live in on other people's comfort, someone who doesn't need to explain themselves to be respected, someone who can love deeply without disappearing in the process. And the truth is, this work doesn't make you more selfish. It makes you more honest. It pulls you out of performance and into presence. You are no longer managing how people perceive you. You're just showing up. And when you stop living for everyone else's perception of you, you finally get to meet yourself clearly. You begin to ask new questions. Not how can I make them comfortable, but instead, what feels honest to me? Not what's the least disruptive thing to say, but what do I actually think? Not how do I keep the peace, but what peace do I need to keep for myself? The shift is really so internal, and no one might notice at first, but you will. You will notice that you don't rush to fill silences, that you can say, I'm not available, without following it up with a 10-line explanation, that you can feel someone's disappointment and not let it swallow you whole. And eventually, little by little, it starts to feel less like guilt and more like relief. Not because it gets easier, but because you get stronger. You begin to trust that honoring yourself doesn't come at the expense of love. It's what makes space for real love to exist. So as you embark on the journey of unlearning people-pleasing, it's going to be essential to recognize that this process is not merely behavioral, but deeply emotional. It's about confronting the discomfort that arises when you prioritize your needs over others and understanding that this discomfort is a natural part of growth. Initially, asserting your needs, it might feel foreign. It might even feel wrong. You might experience guilt, anxiety, or fear of rejection, as I mentioned earlier, but these feelings are not indicators of wrongdoing, but signs that you're stepping out of ingrained patterns. So I really want you to emphasize the importance of valuing your own time and setting boundaries to counteract the stress and overwhelm associated with people-pleasing behaviors. It's also crucial to approach yourself with kindness during this transition because a lot of mistakes are going to be made. You're going to take a lot of steps forward, but also a lot of steps back. So recognize that change is challenging and setbacks are all part of the process. Self-awareness is really the first step towards overcoming that good girl syndrome. And so I really highly recommend incorporating self-care practices. My favorite one is journaling because you can pour all of your thoughts onto paper and it truly, truly helps manage your symptoms and just overall promote personal growth. Now, as you assert your boundaries, some relationships might shift, but those who love you and support you will applaud your efforts to live authentically, while others who benefited from your people-pleasing might feel threatened by your newfound freedom. Another thing is transitioning from seeking external approval to internal validation is such a significant aspect of this journey, and so I highly suggest employing the 80-40-60 rule, which says at 18, you worry about what others think, at 40, you stop caring, and at 60, you realize no one was thinking about you at all. And this perspective can help reduce so much anxiety that's associated with others' opinions and just reinforce the importance of aligning decisions with your personal goals. And listen, developing the capacity to tolerate the discomfort of disappointing others is so vital. So I want you to practice saying no in low-stake situations so that you can build the confidence necessary to establish and maintain personal boundaries, leading to a way more balanced life, kind of like exposure therapy. And I want you to listen carefully. There is a version of you that exists beyond people-pleasing. And no, she's not ruthless or cold. She is just clear. She doesn't over-explain, over-apologize, or over-function to feel safe. She doesn't rehearse conversations in her head to sound acceptable. She tells the truth with softness and certainty and self-trust. And that's the real glow up. Not becoming louder or more savage, but becoming unedited, becoming you. Because when you spent your life performing to avoid discomfort, returning to your real self, it doesn't feel like a makeover, it feels like a reunion. You begin to reclaim the parts you hid to keep the peace, the opinions, the preferences, the voice. And at first, it might feel strange. Your relationships shift, your calendar clears, and some people who were in love with your compliance won't know how to handle your clarity, and that's okay because something powerful happens in the quiet. You stop shrinking to fit and start expanding to be. And as you expand, your life begins to match you. Not the masked version and not the overly flexible version, but the aligned one. You stop attracting situations that rely on your silence. You stop saying yes just because you always have. Instead, you become someone who can be trusted, especially by yourself. Someone who can sit with discomfort and still know their worth. Someone who can say, I love you, but I need something different and not collapse under fear. It's not always graceful. Sometimes your voice shakes, sometimes guilt shows up like muscle memory, but the difference is now you don't backpedal. You don't abandon yourself just to keep the peace. You've learned that peace isn't about avoiding tension, it's about telling the truth. And the glow up is subtle. It's in the uncelebrated moments, such as walking away from performative conversations or saying no and letting that be enough, or choosing rest even when guilt knocks, or just letting someone be disappointed and not rushing to fix it. And then something shifts. You really start to experience mutuality. You build relationships rooted in truth and not performance. And your authenticity becomes an invitation. Your boundaries become a blueprint for healthier love, and you stop being the emotional caretaker. You stop managing how people perceive you, and the people who truly love you, they rise to meet the real you. They adjust, they grow. The ones who don't, they were only ever attached to the version of you that made their life easier, not more honest. So the glow up after people pleasing isn't about perfection. It's about permission. Permission to be complex, direct, soft, and self-honoring. You realize you can love others without betraying yourself. And eventually you look back and realize you never had to become someone else to be worthy of love. You just had to stop being who you weren't. That is the real glow up. Not louder, not harder, just more embodied, more honest, more home in your own skin. And that is power. If you're still here, sitting with everything we just unpacked, I just want to say, I see you. Maybe this brought up moments where you stayed quiet or went along to avoid conflict or felt like your worth was tied to how easy you were to be around. If that's you, you're not alone. People pleasing doesn't make you fake or broken. It means you learned a strategy that helped you survive, and now you're choosing to evolve. And that's not selfish. That's called healing. That's growth. And it takes a lot of courage to stop performing, to speak your truth knowing not everyone will applaud. But every single time you choose alignment over approval, that muscle gets stronger. And even when it's messy or awkward, it still counts. You're going to have days where it feels effortless and others like you're moving through molasses. But every small moment of honesty matters. Every time you disappoint someone instead of betraying yourself, that is a win. Every time you let go of the need to be understood, that is freedom. Eventually, you look up and realize you're not performing anymore. You're just living fully, clearly, and as yourself. So in case no one's told you lately, you are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be complex, to be honest, soft, and powerful all at once. You are allowed to stop living in reaction to who others need you to be. So if this episode resonated with you, I'd love if you could share it with a friend on your story or just by leaving a review so more people can find these conversations. And you can always connect with me on Instagram at Positive Proof Podcast or Parmis Najmi because I love hearing what stuck with you. And to everyone who made it this far, I appreciate you so, so much. And I can't wait to chat with you again in next week's episode. Lots of love, Parmis.